Welcome and thank you for coming. We're here today with Vera Norwood, hoping to learn how not to put your students to sleep with PowerPoint, and we thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This workshop is one of my most favorite things to talk about. And the title is Waking Up from PowerPoint-Induced Sleep. I would like to begin with a confession that I cannot take credit for coining this term, PowerPoint-induced sleep. It comes from an article written by David Brown from Wake Forest University, and it's just titled PowerPoint-induced sleep. But you may have also heard of PowerPoint poisoning and death by PowerPoint, and all of these things describe the phenomenon that we very often observe whenever people are using PowerPoint. So this presentation is not going to increase your technical expertise or technical prowess with PowerPoint. We're not going to be talking about templates and all the features of Microsoft PowerPoint. We're going to spend an hour talking about what it is that makes it a good teaching tool and what's in PowerPoint that makes it a not so good teaching tool. So what situations call for the use of PowerPoint and where we should really put it aside and not use it at all. And that's probably the most important decision that an educator makes, is to decide when not to use PowerPoint and then have the courage not to use PowerPoint for that particular situation. Okay, so let's get started. And as I mentioned, we are all familiar with the PowerPoint-induced sleep phenomenon, and you may have observed it in many classrooms, or you go to a conference, you listen to a presentation, and you think, well, oh my God, how can I get through this one? It's only 25 minutes left. And then we think, well, PowerPoint is a multimedia package, so it doesn't have to be boring. We can animate every element on the slide. And then we run into this. So we go from PowerPoint-induced sleep to PowerPoint-induced amnesia. And the audience walks out remembering every little effect that they saw, how things were flying around, flip-flopping, two videos were playing simultaneously, but then what was the whole thing about? So then when we go from PowerPoint-induced sleep to PowerPoint-induced amnesia, the next question is, and that's it. That's why we're here today, to really discuss, does PowerPoint make us look less than intelligent in some situations? And in fact, Edward Tufte thinks just that. He wrote an absolutely brilliant critique of PowerPoint, the cognitive style of PowerPoint, pitching out corrupts within. And his metaphor for PowerPoint is what you see on the screen. It's a military parade with the statue of Stalin presenting over the whole thing. And the statue says, next slide, please. And then all the slides march by in a preordained order. You can see that the relationship between the presenter and the audience is very authoritarian. I'm standing here in front of you just freely expounding my knowledge, and you are supposed to be absorbing it. And I can only go forward, one slide at a time. PowerPoint does not allow the presenter to step out of the predetermined path, right? It's a military parade. We only do what we are supposed to be doing. Tufte points out that information density of a typical PowerPoint presentation approaches that of the newspaper Pravda under Brezhnev. And then he puts an equal sign between a PowerPoint presentation and a propaganda tool. Well, how many bullet points can you squeeze on one slide? This is a typical commercial pitch. It's pure propaganda. And then we bring it into the classroom, and what happens? Well, we can say, oh, wait a minute. It's not the tool itself, it's how we use it. And in the second edition of this brief, Tufte provides an answer. And again, he asserts his point that it's the cognitive style of PowerPoint. It's not precisely the user's fault. It's how the software makes us organize our flow of thought that makes it such a dangerous thing to play with, particularly in the classroom. Particularly if you are teaching from one of those ill-structured domains, and it's really important for students to see how points connect to each other, and it's not always a direct connection, an easily identifiable relationship between two concepts, and PowerPoint offers us absolutely no help and no support here. So again, as educators, we need to take a very critical look at PowerPoint and see what we can do with it. So why won't we start doing just that? And just 3 questions to get us started. So does PowerPoint even belong in the classroom? Well, Tufte would tell you right away, no. So what do you think?
Yeah, we would have a rule.
Well, de facto, it's here. It's in the classroom, and we use it. And sometimes there's a lot of pressure from your colleagues and your students and your academic department for you to use it. So let's talk about strengths and weaknesses. What do you see as the PowerPoint's greatest strengths? Why do we use it? There has to be something good in it, otherwise you wouldn't be playing with it.
It's really easy to make the lectures.
Absolutely.
And change them, you know.
Very easy to use, very easy to make changes.
Provides a record of what was covered in the lecture, such that you can archive it for students that might not have been there or want to go back and refresh their notes.
Absolutely, and it's easy to use, and it provides a handout, right? You missed the lecture, look at the handout, yes?
I think it's a great organizing tool. You know, in the days before PowerPoint, if you do a presentation, you'd always have an outline at the very least. And if you use it for that purpose, I think it's a great organizing tool.
A very good point. It is a great organizing tool, yes?
Students like it.
Well, yeah, I mean, students like it. But let me turn this around and ask you, why do students like it? Didn't we acculturate them into that?
Well,
And aren't we all acculturated into this PowerPoint deal?
a student like it, I think one of the reasons is they think the main material for a student to study is in the PowerPoint. Is easier to study those slides than reading 2 chapters of book. So that is probably, in terms of perspective, looking a student at it, but that could be the weakness of PowerPoint.
Yes.
And the other thing about a strength of PowerPoint is when you're teaching courses online, there are limited tools to use it, and having Adobe and Breeze and using a slide and PowerPoint, that is very strong. You can have that lecture online. Otherwise, you are limited to a video stream, and so that is one of the strengths for PowerPoint.
Yes, and I would like to come back to the point that you made at the beginning, saying, well, students like it because it provides an outline, right? It's easier to read one slide than 2 chapters out of the textbook. So what are we turning it into? a Reader's Digest version of the textbook. And then do your students read the textbook afterwards? Well, we have to be realistic about that too. And you can see how a brilliant organizing tool is now turning against us. We want students to read, but because we provided them with a PowerPoint handout, they don't have to read. They now rely upon us to serve the Reader's Digest version of education. Any other weaknesses?
I guess I would still make the case that there's also something going on generationally. Students nowadays are very accustomed to receiving their information through some kind of digital medium. They didn't grow up reading, they got it through a computer screen. So I think you have to take that into account, is what's going to still be the best medium to communicate information.
You're right. You're very right.
Our weakness is very linear.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think associated with that, I think the student's initial perception, you can't even grab their attention if you're not technologically savvy. They're just not interested. And I think along with that, students frequently don't understand what learning really is. That learning is an active process where PowerPoint lulls you into a passive process.
Yes.
And it is up to the instructor to engage the student during the presentation so that PowerPoint doesn't lull you to sleep.
Yes, and that means we ourselves first have to be awake and aware before we wake somebody else up. Okay, could you share one of maybe your best experiences with PowerPoint and total PowerPoint horror, nightmare? Yes?
I'm teaching courses online, as you know, where you help me a lot with that. The best experience is I'm teaching a statistics course online, and so think about that for a moment. You have to deal with all the numbers and putting on the PowerPoint. The best experience is make you be organized and structured for a student, especially if you're teaching for non-degree, which are my students are nursing students. So that PowerPoint helped me to make all of my presentation organized and having all the formula or tables there. The worst scenario is, I guess one of my students there, he can tell you it's hard to read some of these slides. So you have to balance that out. I guess the student can print the handout and listen to lecture there. So that is my experience with the PowerPoint.
Yes, yes. So you increase information density and you decrease readability. So where is the balance? Yes?
Best PowerPoint experience, and this was one that I've seen rather than I did. I haven't been quite brave enough to try this, but was a PowerPoint that had absolutely no text whatsoever. It was all photos and visual accompaniment, pictures that thematically went with what the speech the guy was giving. No actual text, not even title text.
Yes.
And that was excellent use of PowerPoint.
All visual. Okay.
You showed me several years ago how to put quizzes on where we could, and so we had a group of 50 students and we put a question up there and then we'd vote on the answer and we'd click and see if it was right or wrong. Could work through that, and the students really love that.
That is engagement.
Mine is kind of the best and worst all in one. It's animation. You know, it's great as a teaching tool when I have to teach kind of an abstract thought to the students in physiology, and now I can give a simple, crude animation that kind of ties this together. But then on the other hand, you spend so much time becoming creative that it becomes you're a slave to PowerPoint. So it's both good and bad. It's fun.
Absolutely, and so we are dancing on this edge, trying to figure out how much information and where's too much, how much animation and where's too much, and what is it doing to us? Are we now organizing everything in the PowerPoint format, not even looking at the nature of the content? So, what do we know about how audiences process PowerPoint? And you can see this is very interesting. And I'm pretty sure that most of you experienced most of this. And yet, we recreated over and over and over and over. And look at this. It's the presenter reading the slides, and the slides overloaded with information and animation where it doesn't belong. So again, the cognitive style of PowerPoint is getting us here. Another thing that we need to take a look at is what we know about multimedia learning. And this comes from research into how people learn with multimedia, how they process the information. And there are just 3 things that we need to be aware of. The first one is that we have 2 channels for processing the information, the visual channel and the auditory or verbal channel. And both channels have to work in sync for the information to be processed. So what we put on the slide should not contradict the message that we project verbally. The next thing is that we can only pay attention to very limited bits of information in both of this channel. So how much information do we put on one slide? How many images can a learner keep in their short-term memory? If we put too much, we definitely overload them. And the third thing is that we do not just absorb the information presented to us. We are sense makers. As the new information is coming in, we are actively working with it, trying to organize it, trying to make sense of it, and make it fit with our already existing mental schema. So when humans learn, they are involved in a very, very complex process. So for this reason, we need to be aware of these 3 things. And again, it comes from Dr. Meyer's research into multimedia learning. And the good thing here is, the 2 channels, and the visual channel and the auditory channel. The PowerPoint can be our friend if we don't do too much. Okay, so where do we go from here? We can look at PowerPoint tips and tricks that kind of help us work with what we have just discussed. We can continue exploring PowerPoint as a teaching tool. Then I would definitely like to show you examples of going beyond the bullet points in the classroom. And if we have time, we can play a PowerPoint game. So, you want to proceed in a linear fashion, just like a military parade? Or...
I want examples of going beyond bullet points.
Okay, you want examples to go beyond bullet points. Okay, here's the Beyond Bullet Points book by Cliff Atkinson. I have to do a little intro into that. Cliff Atkinson is a business consultant, so he works with all these big companies. And what he recommends comes straight out of Richard Mayer's research into multimedia learning. So what Cliff advises us to do is write PowerPoint titles as headlines, summarizing the gist of the message there. And then taking all the words off, or most of the words off, and replacing them with a visual. So what I would like to show you here is a lecture from one of the nursing courses. And I am sorry. Clicked on the wrong thing. Okay, examples of going beyond bullet points. And yes, it's from Dr. Herman's class, Nursing 791. This is the evidence-based practice course. And in this course, she introduces them to the idea of evidence-based practice. And all of you know how students react to anything that has a connection to research. You can just visualize them groaning, moaning. So we were thinking of what can we do? And there are two things that you can do with any kind of content. First is tell it as a story. Make it personal. Tell it as a story because we all like storytelling. And the second thing is visualize it. Turn it into a picture book. So this is what we do here. Oh, goodness. And you know, nursing started with Florence Nightingale, and it's such a, you know, just, what's the adjective here? Yeah, yes. I mean, if there's one person who can summarize nursing, that would be Florence Nightingale, right? It all started with her, and really her personality, her beliefs still permeate the profession of nursing. So we make the connection here, and now watch the PowerPoint titles. And if you don't know anything about nursing, can you begin to piece the story together? And now, thank you very much. Can you retell the story back to me? Did you see how the PowerPoint titles were kind of tying the whole thing together? It all started with Florence Nightingale. Nurses improved practice. They improved practice by observation. They improved practice by data collection. Then all these scientific publications come into being, and it's building on and on and on, and today we have evidence-based practice. And you can tell the story just by looking at the PowerPoint titles. And what does this presentation, say, allow the faculty member, the professor, to do? You can talk as little or as long as the situation requires. With some audiences, you will go a little slower, you will give them a little bit more information. With other audiences, you can speed up. There are no bullet points. Now let's look at the amount of information presented on each slide. And this is for a class, for a 3-hour-long class. So you can either expand your lecture or you can contract your lecture as you need it. And then when you are finished with your introductory part and everybody's now emotionally connected to your subject, you can do a discussion, you can start group work, you can do all these other wonderful methods that really engage students. Okay, does that make sense to you? Okay. Okay, so what other things would you like to do? Okay, should we look at tips and tricks? Tips and tricks, okay. About those bullet points. Sometimes it's just easier to pull all the things that kind of fit into the same category together. I don't really think there's something evil about these bullet points. Some people would say never ever use bullet points. I don't think that it is really doable for us in the classroom. It's wonderful to create those presentations that only have visuals, but sometimes it's just so hard to visualize it. What I would like to emphasize here is that writing titles as newspaper headlines really helps students to remember your message. When you write titles as categories, steps in this process, parts of this, whatever it is, just categories, those are very hard to remember. If you put the message into that PowerPoint title, that will be so much more effective. And what is the most important, what is the most valuable real estate on the PowerPoint slide? It's where the title is. That's where your eyes go right away. That's the first thing that you see. So you can make a much better use of it if you write your titles as headlines. Making bullet points consistent, if you use bullet points, make them grammatically consistent. Like, look at this slide. Avoid, place, write, make, use, include. Each bullet title starts with a verb. And again, it just subtly helps us process the information a little bit better. How many of you have used internal links within a PowerPoint presentation?
Like you were just doing?
Yes. Oh, very good. It helps you to get out of that linear mode of presentation. And all of a sudden, yes, I can go wherever I want to go, wherever I need to go. Any questions or comments about this? No. Colors are important. And you want to work with high contrast colors. Cool colors work better as backgrounds than hot colors. Hot colors are those reds, pinks, and oranges. I really like blue. That's my favorite color. So my PowerPoint presentations tend to be on the blue background. But if you look at that yellow and black, they don't look too bad. And then think school buses. Which color are they? Yellow with black lettering on them. Traffic signs. It's the same thing. So it's very easy for us to read. So high contrast is the most important thing to remember. The amount of text that goes per slide. Remember, dual channel, limited capacity. But this also addresses the point that Tufte makes in his brief. This makes PowerPoint a very low-density presentation medium. You cannot put a lot of information on one slide. Otherwise, it's just not readable, and we cannot process it. When it comes to PowerPoint, and particularly when you teach a large class, and your room is not a mediated room, not one of the smart classrooms on campus, the bigger, the better. And you can see when you step down to the 16-point font, you can barely read it. The simpler the font looks, the better it is. We are increasing readability here. Arial works very good. Arial rounded, empty, bold is very good. Arial black, very good for titles. I cannot even tell the difference in Avant-Garde, Helvetica, and Zurich. But these are all sans serif fonts. They don't have these little feet. The little feet, when you project your slides, you know, when a big projector creates so much noise, they get blurred, and it just creates all this junk on the screen. When you need to emphasize something, what is the best device for emphasis? Which one? Color. Color. If you need more emphasis, if you need to emphasize certain things in different ways, italics are better than underlining. And you can see how underlining is interfering with that G. So the words that have G's and Y's are going to look kind of funny if you underline them. Okay, effects. And really, to increase readability, to make it easier for your learners to process the information, you should stay away from them. And let me play this again. See what happens. You cannot read this word, this line, till it becomes stable. While it's moving, you cannot read it. And imagine if every bullet point will appear with that kind of effect. 5 minutes down the road, you'll have a headache. And the same happens here. A peer effect is very nice on certain slides. What it does, it allows you to narrowly focus your audience on the point that you are introducing. But on every slide, it's a little bit too much. It also so narrowly focuses you that you start reading your slides instead of just interpreting what's on the slide. And now if you would pick up your handout on page 4, there's a little figure, a little chart, and let's do a little exercise. We are looking at different ways of visualizing PowerPoint slides. And of course, the first one is charts, graphs, and tables. In some contexts, up to 80% of information is absorbed visually. And then we have photos and clip art. And it's now very easy with digital cameras being so ubiquitous, and also our cell phones allow us to take pictures, so really there's no excuse why we can't bring in really good, interesting photographs into our PowerPoint presentation. Well, clip art is a little bit controversial these days, because it's no longer equated with a slick-looking professional first-class presentation. Microsoft has created all these wonderful clip art galleries on their site, and they want us to use clip art, but just be aware that a lot of clip art in a PowerPoint presentation now looks a bit old-fashioned. And it looks like, well, this guy doesn't know how to use his digital camera. So, screen captures. This is wonderful. If it's on your computer screen, you just press that print screen button and put it in PowerPoint. Anything that is on your screen can be in your PowerPoint presentation. And then this. If you know how to use the drawing tools in PowerPoint, you can create the most wonderful graphs, charts with pop-outs. This whole sequence of slides that kind of introduced you to different ways of visualizing PowerPoint is a word picture with pop-outs. It's not an animation. It was just easier for me to create a figure and then do this, copy it onto the next slide and build the pop-outs. And it allows you to keep the whole thing all the time in front of the audience, yet concentrate on a certain piece. And then it's easy to see how that piece relates to the whole. And so when you visualize your PowerPoint presentations, what is the most important point to remember? And it's right in the middle.
Relevance?
Yes, images should relate to your teaching points. Don't put visuals that don't support the message. And yet, that is what we very often see. Visuals appear, and then you try to figure out, oh my God, how is what she's talking about relates to what's on the screen? I really want to get to the bottom of it. Forget about the presentation. I just want to know what the connection is. Any questions, comments?
This is very clear. As I look up at the video, it looks to me like that violates what you just told us previously, because you've got white on orange. On the TV.
Yeah.
And it's hard to read. I wonder what's happening, that this is a technological thing, but as it goes out, it's not the same.
And it's probably going to be different when you look at that video stream file on your computer in your office. So it is really difficult to work with computer equipment or multimedia equipment of any kind that you don't control. I mean, all we can do is follow the guideline for selecting high contrast colors. But it's not under our, not every aspect of it is under our control. And in fact, this is a common problem in creating PowerPoint for television. It doesn't work, it's not as bad when it's just in a room with a projector, but we're working with multiple systems here. Any other comments? No. Does everybody know about this? No? This is very neat. When you are presenting, these are the really nice key commands to kind of have at your fingertips. You can go to any slide in your presentation. If you would just punch the number of that slide and then hit enter. For example, my table of contents for this presentation is on slide 10, and I can access it anytime. And then I remember that the slide that I was on just a few seconds ago was number 27, so I can go back to it. Type a number and hit enter, and you go to wherever you want to go in your PowerPoint presentation. For example, if you want to, another thing is, if you want to get rid of your slides for just a few seconds, for just a few minutes while you are doing a discussion or you are elaborating on a point, you hit B, and it turns it to black. And B will bring it back. If you are presenting in a darker room, you don't want to hit B. You want to hit W, and it turns it to white. And then W will bring it back.
Is that the case?
No.
Okay.
No, you just touch the key. If you need a pen, if you want to underline something on the screen, then it's Control P. And now I can do this. So you can talk and you can circle things and underline things and do all kinds of interesting things. And I think it's Control E. It gives me an eraser. I can get rid of that. And if I need my pointer back, it will be, I think it's just Control A. So just a few things that are really very helpful. And they work in PowerPoint 2007 and they work in PowerPoint 2003. So whatever system you are presenting on, you can count on this. This is so common sense. And the most important thing is don't read your slides. The thing about the lights, this is a very nice room because we control the lights. We can dim the lights in the back or bring the lights up in the back, dim the lights in the front, and this is exactly what you want. This is wonderful, but you can't control the environment in every room that you present. But leave some lights on so that your audience won't go to sleep. Vary your speaking volume. You can speak a little bit louder and then just bring the volume down a little bit. That's another little technique, presenting technique that helps your audience stay awake. And then hit the B or the W and the slides go off the screen, and then you can do a discussion or go into do another activity and just vary the pace of what you are doing. And the most important thing is probably to find your own style and figure out what works for you. At this point, does anybody have a question? No?
Oh, I've sort of got a comment. Just one thing I've been playing with lately, and I'm actually using Keynote instead of PowerPoint now, but is PowerPoint has this too, I think. They have a presenter mode.
Yes.
Where you can have your slide up there, but then on your computer monitor you can have, I think it shows your current slide, the next slide, and any notes that you have attached to that slide. And I found that's real helpful. Part of the reason there's a tendency, I think, to bury slides in bullet points is that helps you remember what you're going to talk about.
Yes.
But if you can take the reminders for yourself and separating them off into that notes section rather than showing it to the students, that can remind you with that, or just use paper notes. And then the students only have to see the title or the main points rather than all of your reminders.
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right. Any more comments now? What would you like to do next? We already looked at examples of beyond bullet points. Should we talk about the teaching stuff a bit more? Okay. Remember how we talked about the strengths of PowerPoint? PowerPoint, one thing that I would like to comment on here is organizing student note-taking behavior. And then look at the handout from this workshop. Is it in PowerPoint? No. And the reason why I didn't do 3 slides per page or 6 slides per page, because I really wanted to share the resources, and putting the resources, all these big links and big titles on a PowerPoint slide is awful. You know, when you go to conferences and you get that 6 slide per page handout, I always check on the references and resources. And I cannot even read anything because it's so small. So don't think of PowerPoint as a software that gives you a handout. There's nothing wrong with giving students a Word document as a handout. And in fact, if you have to provide a lot of detailed information, that's the only way you can handle it. A Word document or an Excel spreadsheet is not a bad idea either. Just give them the information that they need. Don't be limited to just, 3 slides with little lines from PowerPoint. Yes?
Then they complain. When you reformat it into like a rich text file, try to make it so they can see everything, and then she didn't give us her PowerPoint slides.
I'll say that's how we train them. That's how we train them. And now it's really difficult to break out of this mode. But if your Word document is sort of organized by PowerPoint title, if it's easy for students to follow you, then I think you're going to be okay. Any more?
Maybe I'm a prisoner to the paradigm, but I tend not to give out handouts because I can capture all the information I want the students to have in PowerPoint, and that's one of the reasons that I use it. I can capture it all there, all the information that I want them to have, whether it's text or visual, is there archived online, and they can go access it anytime they want.
Oh, I don't give it to them. We make it available to them through Blackboard. But if you post for the students something different, like I stripped the pictures and put it in a Word format and make everything so you could read it and took some of the big fonts out so it would be smaller for them to print off. Because I didn't own the pictures, I was doing this as a one-time class, and I got multiple complaints.
Yes.
Actually, on the same topic, I run into this issue occasionally. So I teach a lot of cases, and so you focus on particular organizations, and you have kind of the concepts that you go through, and then you have the cases that you go through. And I'll make my slides available on the concepts, but not on the cases, because we tend to repeat those. And that is a big source of tension, like trying to convey to them why they can have some slides and they can't have other slides. It actually makes me not use PowerPoint a number of times when it really would be a helpful tool to use, because it generates the expectation that otherwise they should get the slides.
Yes, this has definitely become the problem, that students don't even look at the quality of information provided. They simply want your PowerPoint slides because the assumption is they are only responsible for what you put on your PowerPoint slides, that Reader's Digest education. And I don't really have a solution at this point how we can overcome that. Mm-hmm.
In the, at least the 2 undergraduate courses I teach, they're very, very high content courses. I have to spoon feed them some information, just pure and simple, because I can't get through the material otherwise. But I also am training them to go beyond just the spoon feeding. I actually will post a figure, or a graph, or whatever, and I will spend an inordinate amount of time walking the students through the figures, because that's part of their education. Mm-hmm. While they've had biology, they've had chemistry, they don't know science, and they sure don't know how to look at a figure and ground themselves so that they can even begin to understand it. So I give them my PowerPoints. I just post them online. They can print them off if they choose. Yeah. That way they can write all over these figures. And they can, you know, obviously if there's no text on the slide at that moment in time, they have to listen to me.
Yes.
And I will use means, rather it be open circles, to highlight what I want them to see at that moment in time. I mean, I will highlight the title of the x-axis. I will highlight the title of the y-axis so they pay attention. They're focused on what I want them to see at that moment in time as I'm walking them through the figures. And the students who are interested in science and interested in learning come back and they like it. And they will tell me they like it. It's the students who don't want to move to the next step of education that complain.
You are absolutely right. Yes.
Maybe I'm just a little hardcore here, but I have never given students my PowerPoint.
Oh my
And
My teachers are right out of the book.
I'm not giving it to you. You're going to have to take your own notes.
You're too big, that's why. They don't fight with you, they fight with me.
Or maybe we need to clone those students.
See, that's just it. I mean, there's so much information. I'm really teaching out of the book. I'm just doing it differently than the book does it. It's the same information. I can't teach them extra other than if I want to, you know, take an excerpt here and there. The figures are out of the book, but they get to draw on them now rather than draw in their book and not be able to resell it.
You know, the problem with that is also that the students want to spend so much time on a given slide to write it down. If you have 300 students in a classroom, then it will take you forever to go through your lecture.
Well, that's why I've gotten rid of bullet points on almost all my slides. They get the title and they have to extract the other stuff from what I'm talking, which I sometimes don't know for sure if students these days have that skill since they're so used to copying down the bullet points, but it's worked well so far.
I see a huge difference between the first semester and the second semester.
Yes.
The students who graduate from the first part of this class are inordinately better students the next semester. And the ones who don't graduate don't deserve to graduate or pass the class. Okay, but no, literally, the timing that you take in the second semester of the class is entirely different. They do adapt. But of course, if you only teach one semester, it's kind of irrelevant.
Okay, should we look at what PowerPoint is not good at? Large amounts of information. Remember the 7x7 rule? And spontaneous feedback. We prepare those PowerPoint presentations ahead of time, so when a discussion leads us somewhere and the material for that discussion is not in our PowerPoint presentation, it's pretty much useless. Non-linear paths are difficult to handle. What if somebody asks you a question and it's 25 slides ahead of you? That's right. Recording input from the audience. How can you do that in PowerPoint? There is a way, it's just not easy. You get out of the presentation mode into the edit mode, and then you start adding information to your slides. And in fact, if you are conducting a discussion and you would like to summarize that discussion, you can put in a blank slide in your PowerPoint presentation and then work on it during the class and then display it back to the audience. That is actually very nice. It's a very powerful way of involving the audience, because then they get to see their input as part of your presentation, and that makes it very, very meaningful to them. Yes?
This is another one of those, I've heard of this but have never dared tried it type things, but I have heard of professors who just go into class with a blank, empty PowerPoint presentation and just type it and talk, and using it more like writing on the chalkboard, just with nicer handwriting, than as a prepackaged presentation.
Yes, and it really involves the audience that way. I cannot do that because I get too excited and then my hands shake. but try it. Particularly if you teach through discussion, it might be a very good way to, yes.
Well, a lot of the rooms on campus now actually give you access not only to computer input, but they also have the projection for the old overheads. So all you need is a piece of paper. You don't need the clear ones anymore, and you can just write it down. And I've been contemplating how can I actually use that in my lectures more, knowing that the students are going to balk at it the first time they see it. So obviously I have to build up some confidence and make wise decisions when I choose to apply it. You know, maybe I'll get back to you when I finally do.
Yes?
I find it easier using PowerPoint presentations for a large classroom and use the clicker system. Talking about spontaneous feedback, you know, I teach, part of the lecture, and then I put up a question with multiple choice answers, and, then they will click on the right answer. And I also record input from the audience, because I would have a record of, who answered, and how they answered that particular question. And I take participation with that. I give extra credit with that. If I didn't use PowerPoint, I would find it more difficult to use this system, because it's all integrated, with PowerPoint files.
Yes, I agree. Now there are really very good plug-ins that allow you to make it a little bit more interactive, and then the iClickers and all these other things that tie into PowerPoint. So anything that engages them.
Keeps them awake, for sure.
Yeah.
If you can go back to the previous slide, I would just ask, actually there was the one more, it was the one where you're showing PowerPoint is not good at. If you think about I guess what you would call the traditional format of lecturing, where you might prepare notes and go and lecture on the blackboard or the whiteboard, wouldn't you be faced with a lot of those same issues?
Yes.
So, in that sense, PowerPoint may not be good at it, but neither is the traditional.
I think the only thing in common is the first one.
What's that?
I think that the only thing in common is the first bullet point.
Yeah.
I think that chalkboards are good at spontaneous feedback, or the piece of paper on the Elmo projector. And changing the order you present information depending on where your audience is.
But if you're using a PowerPoint presentation, there's nothing to stop you from...
Unless you're stuck to your notes, and the only thing you're going to do is copy from your notes.
Right, but there's nothing to stop you. If you're doing a PowerPoint presentation, there's nothing to stop you from exploring some tangent, on the board or in the discussion with the class. That's not prohibited. So you can always move over to that, just like he was talking about with the overhead projector. So
the danger with PowerPoint is that we spend time doing these things. We think, we structure our thinking so much. We lay it out and put so much effort into it. Then when we present, we really want to be in that path, because by golly, I spent hours doing that. But again, in the classroom, you really cannot do that. You need to go where the learners need you to go, and sometimes it conflicts with what we want to do just because we worked on it so hard.
Well, it's also it depends what your audience is and how large your audience is. You know, if you speak to 300 students, it's different than speaking to 10 students.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are in a large auditorium and you want to write something on the marker board, the students in the back of the class would probably not see it. You know, they are probably better off actually reading a PowerPoint slide than reading your handwriting, you know, on a marker board.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
you have to craft your PowerPoint
And
presentation
it's all
to the audience.
in the balance, because there are trades-off everywhere. We make it easier for them to read, we increase the font size, but then we need to decrease the amount of information that we are displaying on one slide. And the audience is looking at one slide at a time, so it's harder to make connections between what's presented on slide A and then what's presented on the following slide. And that does lead into the fragmentation of information and this butterfly effect. Okay, so whenever you read anything on how to use PowerPoint in the classroom, they always tell you, use it judiciously. And then you wonder, well, what in the world does that mean? Use it judiciously, because it's such a broad term, and it means different things for different people. So find the thing that works for you, and that would be your judicious use of PowerPoint. And the most important thing is to realize you don't have to use it for every class. You don't have to use it for everything that you do. You can use it for pieces and really support those parts of your instruction where PowerPoint enhances. You can visualize it. You can bring in all kinds of multimedia material through PowerPoint, because that multimedia capacity, multimedia potential is probably the strongest feature of PowerPoint. And then tell a story and visualize it. Storytelling is a very, very important skill. We all like stories. We like personal stories. We go away from a lecture, and what do we remember? A collection of stories. So whenever possible, tell it as a story. Yes, handouts are very, very handy, and students like them, but just remember it doesn't have to be PowerPoint all the time. And then there's nothing wrong in adding a Microsoft Word document if you really need to give a large amount of text to your students, or an Excel spreadsheet so you can talk about data and they can follow you there. Prepare students for PowerPoint projects means that if an assignment in your class just calls for a PowerPoint presentation, say by a student team, the danger is that they will do what? Yes, they will focus on all the cool multimedia stuff, and they will forget about the content. So if you want students to present with PowerPoint, you have to look at the requirements for that assignment, and maybe there will be 3 deliverables, a paper, and you will look at the depths of reasoning and the depths of understanding the content. Then students can present that topic with PowerPoint, and you will be assessing their ability to distill the most important things and present them in a convincing manner in front of their peers. So instead of 1 deliverable, we are now looking at 3. Games are wonderful, and always have a backup plan, because your projection system can fail. You may be presenting in a room where you don't control the lights, and all kinds of things can happen. Then your colors may be out of kilter. You don't know whether it's that easy for the audience to read the slides as you wanted it to be. Well, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Okay, so let me very quickly go to my table of contents. And the one thing we didn't do is this PowerPoint game. You want to see how it can be used? Okay, and my sound effect is not working, but oh no, there it was. It just, PowerPoint decided to take its time to. Okay, this is based on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and this is how much money you can get. Just like in that game, there are some support mechanisms. 50-50 means that out of 4 possible answers for each question, you can ask me to take 2 away, and then you only have to guess between the 2. And you can ask the audience to help you. So who would like to play it? Do we have a volunteer, or do you want to do it as a group?
Eva's volunteered.
Oh, Elvis, you want to do that? Okay. Well, just remember about 50-50 and okay, and asking the audience. Okay. Very good. Okay, for $10,000, PowerPoint is very good at providing presentation framework, interaction with audience, spontaneous feedback, or edutainment. What is the correct answer? PowerPoint is very good at?
A, I would say.
And the correct answer is presentation framework. Yes. Okay, now we are playing for $50,000. The optimum font size for text on PowerPoint slides is 16 points, 24 points, 32 points, or 48 points.
C.
And the correct answer is C, 32 points. Oh, very good. See, this is an excellent thing to do at the end of a class session to make sure they remember the main points. For $100,000, PowerPoint appeals to learners of different learning styles because of its cool animation effects, bulleted and numbered lists, colorful background and fonts, or multimedia potential.
Well, I would say.
You can throw out a lifeline?
Okay, you want to poll the audience?
Yeah, let's call audience. It's C or D, I guess.
And the correct answer is D, multimedia potential. Visualize, bring in audio, bring in video, external links, multimedia potential. And for $500,000, which PowerPoint animation effect is more appropriate for training? Appear, boomerang and exit, spin, float. For training and teaching, which? And the correct answer is A. Yes, it allows you to narrowly focus the audience on the point that you are explaining, but it doesn't create all this movement on the screen that gives them a headache. And finally, for $1 million, what should the presenter do when using PowerPoint? Face the audience, avoid reading the slides, make pauses, or all of the above.
D.
And the correct answer is D. Yes, all of the above. Do all of these things when you present. So, we have a millionaire.
Show them what happens when they guess wrong.
If we did the wrong answer, what?
Do you have an alternate?
Actually, yes. If you get the wrong, if the answer is wrong, all I have to do is click on this little thing. It takes me back where I can start my second contestant. It's internal links. Internal links in PowerPoint. You can't create multiple paths through one presentation. And as you can see, this is very easy to do, but it creates a really nice effect. It kind of wakes everybody up, livens it up.
Are there templates for games like this, or is this something you have to build on?
It's in the handout. In the handout, you have all the sources where you can go and grab Jeopardy and Millionaire and all kinds of things. Okay, and let me take you to the conclusion slide, because I'm following my own guidelines. So we went over the guidelines for presenting and designing PowerPoint presentations. This is a very nice book by Cliff Atkinson, Beyond Bullet Points. I strongly recommend it to you. Again, he recommends writing each slide, each title as a headline, and then just putting a visual on it. It's a little bit on the extreme, I think, for most classroom presentations because some contents are just extremely difficult to visualize. But we can start working towards that goal. And remember the nursing presentation about why nurses should be involved in evidence-based practice? We kind of got there with that presentation. And students really appreciated it. Dr. Herman got really nice comments, unsolicited, from the students. Build on PowerPoint strengths, and we had an excellent discussion on what PowerPoint is good for and what actually works in the classroom. And just vary your strategies and techniques. It doesn't have to be all lecture. There are other neat things that you can do in the classroom with PowerPoint. Okay. Any concluding thoughts, remarks from the audience?
We've got about 5 minutes left. If you have questions for Vera, anybody?
Just one comment. We were talking about, you said the auditory and visual learning, and the discussion that went on about students reading and taking notes. My experience was that there are certain of us that the very act of taking a note and physically writing it is a very different learning experience than just checking off on the handout that this point was covered.
Yes.
So I think that that's another dimension, and it's an argument toward the student physically having to write. And the other thing is that students, in my experience, come now to classes and they simply are not proficient at writing physically, so that when they take an exam that requires a short answer or a discussion, it takes them longer to do the exam, and so material that 10 or 15 years ago the exam was a 50-minute exam, the students won't finish it today. And so those are aspects that I don't know how y'all deal with it now, but it's a real phenomenon, I think.
It really is, and again, it's all this digital environment that is fragmented, but on the other hand, students are so used to being entertained, and they are so used to information being available to them in all these different formats. So now that they are this way, what do we do with them?
And I think in the same way that my master's comps were typed, rather than written out or oral, that we might, some professors, my son is a freshman here, told me he couldn't take his laptop in their classroom. And he's like, I'm not playing games, this is how I take notes. And I think we have to be open to letting them do things their way, whereas we wrote out all our notes longhand. I know in the College of Nursing we have a full.
Well, when students have, in my classes, tried to do that, they suffer because they have no understanding on how to deal with the figures that I present to them.
What he actually does is download stuff from the web or the textbook ahead of time.
The way I see it is attention deficit. I think this is what kids deal with right now. And even, I have students bringing laptops. I think that is an attention deficit. It's one thing, to have a piece of paper and focus, on a lecture and, take your own notes. It's different, you may, get an email, you want to check it. I mean, it's inevitable, especially if you have, a wireless connection. They just tend to have, to be distracted by things very easily. And that's why it takes them longer to learn anything, or to focus on an exam.
And I think one point that Vera made very, very clearly was that we all have to find our own style for what works with us. She did something today that you may not have even recognized, going back to your comment, with the handout. She left blanks in the handout. That's something that Vera taught me was about, it's called active note-taking. You don't have to give them every word. It's okay if they actually have to write something, heaven forbid. And the finding your style and what works with your large audience or small audience is very important, and PowerPoint's just one part of that. So if you would help me thank Vera very much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. That was.
You have, those of you who are here with us have an evaluation form to fill out. Those of you who are watching online, please fill out the evaluation online. And we hope to see you again at some Center for Teaching Excellence events. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience. We had a great discussion.
Very good.
And nobody fell asleep.
That's right.
Yes.
Nobody fell asleep. Those are really great resources.